Why not?
Because after careful consideration, I felt that figure was not appropriate. Although you may not agree, you'll have to trust my experience and judgment. And
you want me to trust you? Do me a favor, Ed. Don't use big words you don't understand.
It's a complicated issue, Erin. You know,
I did a job.
Lawyer.
You should reward me accordingly. It's not complicated. You know what? That is the fucking problem. All you lawyers do is complicate situations that aren't complicated. Do you know why people think all lawyers are backstabbing, blood-sucking scumbags? Because they are. And you know, I cannot believe that you were doing this to me now when I'm up to my ass in Kettleman plaintiffs, which, by the way, looks like it's going to be double the amount that we had in Hinckley. And you expect me to go out there, leave my kids to be looked after by strangers, knock on doors, get these people to trust you with their lives, and the whole time you're screwing me. I want you to know something, Ed. It is not about the number. It is about the way my work is valued in this firm. It's about how no matter what I do, you're not...
As I was saying, I decided that the figure you proposed was inappropriate. So I increased it. Do they teach beauty queens how to apologize? Because you suck at it.
All right, so that is an example of some emotional intelligence example of where two people are on different paths, and that's what Matt's going to be talking to you about, how that happens in our real life. And I'm sorry, Jessie, I should have been apologising to you about the slanderous lawyer talk there. Jessie's a lawyer by trade, everyone, so that's not true. We don't think that about you, Jessie. So I'm just going to practice, because I've got now 6 minutes up my sleeve before Matt jumps in. I'm going to just put you into breakout rooms, and if you can get into your breakout rooms, and I'd love for you just to share what you thought of that. Breakout rooms, all right, and assign Emily. Oh God. Yeah, we'll just see how that goes. We're going to see how we go. Has everyone got one? Move to 3. Jessica.
I don't know what happened there, Fee. I got redirected.
Right. We're both together.
We'll have our own breakout room.
Thank you, Jess. Sorry. As I said, I'm so glad that I practiced now. And Matt's in here now too. So we can have a quick chat to Matt before we get everyone back from their rooms. I'm assuming that they're all talking to each other and having a lovely time. So I won't leave you alone.
It's fine.
Hi, Matt. How you going?
Hi there. How are you, Fiona?
I'm well. Matt, we're all in breakout rooms at the moment,
Yeah.
but it was my first try at actually doing that. And
how'd you go?
Well, poor Jess missed out.
I'm stranded.
So she's
Oh,
stranded
Jess,
with me.
You're an island amongst yourself, Jess.
Yeah. She got the teacher. She's up the front seat.
Have I been naughty?
I did like you, Fiona, when we met, but I like you extra now. Not only have you a Richmond fan, but you've got the vintage jumper on. Hey, look, Fiona.
Oh my goodness. Well,
That's the best book.
I've just got to confess something though,
Yeah.
Matt, is that I'm a little bit torn. My family is mad Richmond. So
Yeah, all
probably
right.
as you are as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because of that, because it was always easy to keep the peace as a mum, is just let Richmond win. But I'm
Yeah.
actually Geelong.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And this vintage thing
Yeah, I love
is
that.
fleecy lined.
Oh,
So I
that's
grabbed it
awesome.
off my husband's floor robe that we call it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I will
Cool.
I'm just getting a text here from one of our participants, and she's on her own as well. You're not the
Oh.
only one, Jess. I've left. So I'm going to close the rooms and bring them all back in together.
Yeah.
But
I'll
yeah,
let you carry on and I'll
I
just
do
wait.
love the Tigers, Matt. I
Yeah,
really, I've got a very soft spot for them.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's been a good couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping that this year will be good as well. Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm thinking that they'll all just come back. Emily, I'm sorry. You and Jessica, I had you in your own room. Sorry. You're muted. And I think the others.
I was just hanging out on my own.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm glad we've got other avenues of communication as well.
At least you weren't stranded with the teacher.
Yeah, that's right. Jess got in a room with me. Poor thing. I'm just hoping that everyone else is. I'm just wondering where they are now. All right. I hope I haven't lost them all. Okay, just let me go back into breakout rooms. 3 seconds. They're all coming back.
Yeah, right.
It must give a time. Yeah, okay.
It's good, isn't it?
It is. It's very good. Hi, everyone. I sort of stuffed up. Jess got in a room just with me, and poor Emily got in a room on her own with no one else. So that's all right. It was always going to be a practice run. Okay. So it's very exciting. Matt, I've given a little bit of an introduction, but this is Matt in the flesh.
Hello.
And I've given a very, very different introduction into what emotional intelligence is. I actually just played a little YouTube clip. So
yep.
I don't know what everyone else knows. So yeah, it's over to you. Thanks, Matt, and thank you very much for coming along.
No worries. It's very good to be here. I have been talking to Fiona about your program, and it sounds really great. So I've got a bit of an association with Leisure Networks. I did some work with their leadership team throughout last year on and off in some different programs. And one of the things that the leadership team really liked was emotional intelligence, the session as part of their leadership development program. So So Fiona's given me a call and we've talked about what's going on. So I thought this would be a good topic for you all, and leadership and emotional intelligence and the way your emotions impact on your thoughts and actions are a really interesting topic, and certainly something that we all require develop in. So what I'm going to do is I've prepared a bit of a presentation, but I would just love for you to, have some input, ask questions, anything you like. I mean, don't sort of stand on ceremony. I see there's not a million of us, so I'm very happy to answer any of your questions. And I don't like doing lectures. I know this mode does tend to be a bit lectury, but I think you'll find that you can relate to this content, even though you probably don't know that you have got a fair bit to do with emotional intelligence as a leader. The thing is, you probably do. So what I've tried to do today is put this topic into a context that will make some sense to you, based on Fiona's input and understanding a little bit about your program. So I'll start with some, I'll share my screen now so you can have a look at this. And how's that? Is that working? Yay. One small step for Matt. One large step for Matt Kind. So it's a really average day down here in Ocean Grove. So technology hopefully won't fail us, but if it does, just hang in there. So, okay, so here we go then. I'm going to talk to you about, firstly, an introduction. I am a senior HR professional from this area, and I've worked for a long time in HR, people and culture for a few different organisations in the area. I'm also a mediator, which means I solve fights, and I have coached lots and lots of people on emotional intelligence and through self-development, 360-degree feedback and all of that sort of stuff. I really like doing leadership development, and that's this little bit as if, I don't know, you kind of get in that dating app mode a little bit when you start doing this. That's what I look like when I'm dressed up. So there you go. Also, on the flip side of that, like you, I wear many hats as well. I do the work thing, but I've also got, you know, a lot going on outside of that too. Have 2 boys and been living down here on the Peninsula for a long time. Interestingly, to this forum, I thought I would mention that 2 years ago, I helped to start the first women's baseball team in the Geelong Baseball Association through the Bellarine Bears, and we remain still, we didn't get to play this year, of course, but we're still the only women's team in the GBA. And when I say, when you think, oh, women's team, it's not a women's comp, it's the Geelong Baseball Association. So our women's team play against guys mostly, and the odd female participant as well. The Bears made a conscious decision in line with the values that we've developed of inclusion, success, and another one that escapes me, that we thought it was worthwhile trying to get a representation in our sport, which is not a popular sport, baseball, but it's been really good and it's added a lot to our culture. I coach juniors, like many of you out there, and I've coached T-ball and under 12s for many, many years. And the last point I did want to say by way of introduction is sometimes I get introduced and it makes me cringe a little bit about being an emotional intelligence expert. I'm really not. If you saw me at the football, when Richmond gets a bad call from an umpire, you'll see a significant lack of self-control and self-awareness, or so my wife tells me. I don't believe her, but you know. So there's not really any such a thing. So what I do is I like this stuff. It's really interesting and I can explain it. So I hope you'll get something out of it. And here's a good little pic too. Here's me coaching Alyssa, one of my under 12s. And that's just the classic 2020 coaching shot, hey. So here we go. So what's all this about? So emotional intelligence is the capacity to recognize our own feelings and those of the others around us, motivating ourselves and managing emotions well in ourselves. Ultimately, it's about understanding how our emotions are driving our actions. That sounds really technical and businessy, but it will make sense today, I promise. So hang in there. I was trained in this stuff by a fellow called Martin Newman, and he's written a book and he runs an organization that does really, really good things in this space. So that's where this all came from. What I'm going to talk today about are these 10 emotional intelligence competencies, okay? So they're all listed on there, makes sense. And emotional intelligence is the way our emotions impact on our thoughts, behaviors, feelings, actions, and the way we treat other people around us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how that works, okay? By way of sort of definition, I thought I'd go through, no, I won't go through 10 of them, believe me, it's okay, you'll be right. But I will go through a few of them to give you a little bit of context about what it is we're talking about, okay? If you've got any questions, please jump in. So let's start with what I probably think of as the most important emotional intelligence competency, and that's self-awareness. So self-awareness, why is that important? So we get along well with people at work, at home, you know, on our committees, in our sports teams, with those who are self-aware. self-aware means that I consider what I'm doing and how that's having an impact on the other people around me. So I think about the things that I'm doing. You know, is that going to be, is that going to negatively impact on that person? So the opposite of self-aware is, I think you've probably met people like that in your life as well. And that's the people who, well, frankly, don't care about how their actions and behaviors affect or impact on other people. I think of it very much as the key to emotional intelligence, because without self-awareness, we just bumble along through life and offend people, don't offend people, without really any conscious awareness of that at all. Self-awareness isn't easy either. So you probably know when you're meeting or interacting with someone who is self-aware, because they're the sort of person that might, you know, ask you, how are you doing today? Yeah. So they're sort of thinking outside of their own perspective. Self-awareness grows throughout our life, as does emotional intelligence. I should say too, there's a difference between IQ, or as we think of intelligence. IQ tends to peak, you know, sort of in your 20s or something like that. It doesn't mean you get really dumb, you get more mature. But in terms of intelligence, EQ doesn't peak, it keeps going. You're still learning, you're still becoming more an emotionally intelligent person, you know, through your whole adult life. Self-actualization is a part of an emotional intelligence, which is really, really interesting. And it's got something to do with work-life balance. People who feel that they are balanced people are those that have the ability to compartmentalize work life and home life. And do excuse me if I drift into work speak a bit. I do this coaching mainly in leadership development inside organizations. So that tends to be my focus, but I'll very much get onto what you guys do and how this stuff impacts on you as well. Work-life balance, though, the way we think of it is interesting too, because work-life balance has got nothing to do with the amount of hours you spend at your desk, or as most of us are doing at our kitchen tables, or I've got 2 workplaces and 2 kids at school going on at home here. I'm sure many of you are the same. So it's not about the hours, but it's about the amount that you bring yourself to your job, or what HR people know as engagement. So how you can test this too, it's really, really interesting. And it's not just a work thing, it can be in a sports club thing. So have you noticed that sometimes when you're making changes on your committees or in your clubs, that for some people, we're going to change training from Tuesday to Wednesday. And for some people, they'll go, yeah, okay, that's fine. And for other people, it's like, hold the phone. That's a big deal. You are introducing change into my universe. Does that sound familiar to anyone out there? Getting some nods? Yeah, okay. So that's got a lot to do with this emotional intelligence competency. So people who you change their desk at work and that causes you know, psychological stress, may not have a lot going on outside of work. So the things that you change inside, it's a bigger deal proportionately. If I'm a pretty happy, you know, person that's like, yep, okay, my job's being made redundant, but hey, I'm healthy, I've got a good family life, you know, I'm not drowning in debt. So, you know, it's tough, but you know, that's life. That's work-life balance, okay? Some people think that work-life balance is achieved when you clock off at 5 o'clock and go home, and that's not true. That actually says a lot about the fact that you probably don't like your job that much. So work-life balance comes when you are engaged in what you do, and that saying I put in there is one I really like. People that love their job have found 8 hours a day. It's really true when you think about it, because if it's not a terrible chore doing what you're employed to do, then, you know, you're generally a happier person in life. and this is a good group of people to speak to about work-life balance, because who's more self-actualized than all of us suckers who keep putting our hand up at every every AGM and then go, yeah, I'll do it, yeah, yep, lots of nods, we know. So you're self-actualized people. You wouldn't be on the leadership program if you weren't self-actualized. People who achieve self-actualization are those that can make and set challenging goals for themselves. So athletes are the ultimate in self-actualization. I mean, honestly, I've done a marathon once, which I know you find that hard to believe looking at me now, but it was 5 years ago. It was the hardest thing I ever did, and there was a sign in the middle of that. It was in Melbourne, and I was about the 38-kilometre point, and someone held up a sign, and it said, "Smile, you're paying for this." And I thought, yeah, fair point, because I wanted to crawl away and die at that particular point, and I paid a lot of money to be there, so I thought, well, I should finish. Okay, flexibility. The way we approach change is really, really indicative of our level of of emotional intelligence, right? Change is a necessary and required part of our life, like it or not, right? You will experience change. However, again, sort of similar to the last one, the way we respond and react to change as a leader will communicate a lot about ourselves to our audience and the people around us. So change is really hard for some people to cope with and accept, but it is very necessary. One of my favorite change, and this is an actual quote from someone I was doing work with as a HR manager, said to me once, yeah, change is fine, just leave me out of it. And I thought, yeah, I get it. You don't like change. Fair enough. Okay, so assertiveness. Now, I want to spend some time on the next two competencies. So assertiveness. What does that look like? So here's a historical figure, and his name's General Patton, and he was a World War II general, 5-star general in the US Army, and he was in charge of the defense of the Allied forces in the South Pacific. So he was at one point just off like New Guinea up in the north in the 1940s. So when we look at a picture like this and in our minds we go, okay, assertive, I get that, right? That's an assertive person. I'm not sure if you know who this lady is, but you might have seen her before. This is the lady by the name of Rosa Parks. Now, Rosa Parks was a very, very interesting lady, and she, on the December the 1st of 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, she refused to obey a bus driver's order that she give up her seat to make room for a white passenger. This was one of the very first and early actions in what led to the end of segregation in the United States. Now, when I think of assertiveness, I think of Rosa Parks, because on the right of your screen, or the right of my screen, you've got someone who is employed in a job that could generally be described as assertive. On the left-hand side, you've got a lady who went so far out of her way to be an assertive person, you know, and win against every at that particular day in 1955, everything that was telling her to not be assertive. Here's a good quote that I really like, and I'd like you to think about. Assertiveness is the ability to communicate without fear. What do I mean when I say that? So fear is an interesting one, and there's a quite a good saying which I wanted to show you. I will get back to that. Hang on, sorry. Whoa, too far. Reload. So here's there's a, what do you call it? An anagram? It is. An anagram of fear is when we I've forgotten how it goes exactly. It's about when our fears override our conscious minds that direct us in a way that we know that we shouldn't really go in. So what I mean when I say that is assertiveness is our ability to do the tough stuff in life because we're actually worried about how our emotions are going to override our ability to, you know, do what it is that we wanted to do at that particular time. So I'm not sure if that makes sense to you exactly, but we'll go to the next slide and I'll try to explain this a little bit more. When I do leadership development with people in the business world and even schools and things like that, and this is particularly a thing with particularly younger female leaders, I always ask them before I show them their like psychometric results in these sort of things. I ask them, what do you think that you'll struggle with when you see your results? What do you think you'll be strong at? What do you think you won't be strong at? And most people, particularly females, because I'm often doing the emerging leaders programs and things like that, say, I don't think I'll be very good at self-confidence, which is interesting too, because what they're actually talking about is assertiveness. So there's a real difference between self-confidence and assertiveness, and it's very relevant to everyone here who is currently or is aspiring to be in a leadership role. The difference between self-confidence and assertiveness is basically this. Self-confidence indicates that I like the person who I am. Assertiveness indicates that I'm concerned how my emotions are going to override my actions. Does that make sense? Let's talk about self-confidence in a minute, and then we'll understand this a little bit more. So here's a historical figure that I'm sure you've seen before, and he has a great saying, and it's very specifically related to self-confidence. You can't lead a cavalry if you think you look funny sitting on a horse. Now, I was thinking about self-confidence in your context just yesterday, 2 days ago when I was writing this up. And I thought it's actually really interesting in the sports world. So Fiona told me that most of you are involved, either sporting people yourself or involved through committees or coaching or something along those lines. So this is really, really relevant. Now, it's interesting when you think about it. So if you could teach your athletes or your club members how to kick the ball or hit the ball or, you know, things better, or alternatively, you could teach them, let's say that you could teach them to be 38% better in kicking, hitting and all that sort of stuff. Or alternatively, you could teach them, guaranteed, to be 38% better at self-confidence. What would you choose? Which would you choose? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want.
Maddie, I can see you're going to say something.
I definitely choose self-confidence, just in terms of cricket. So I'm a cricket coach, and
yep.
Cricket is largely about confidence.
Mm.
If they had improvement in their self-confidence, then their skills would also increase at a similar rate, I imagine.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? And I was thinking about this as I was writing this up, and I thought, you know, so and I know even as a player myself, I play baseball as well as all the coaching stuff too. And the difference when you get up to bat after you've struck out versus the difference you get up to bat when you've had a safe hit is, if you put it in a scale, massive. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because, and this is what, and hopefully you all will take this with you. I like Fiona, I'm a big fan of Richmond. I'm a Tigers fan. Sorry, all you Geelong people. And one of the best books I've read on leadership is this one above my head, and it's called Yellow and Black: A Season with Richmond. And a reporter from The Age, his name's Conrad Marshall, he followed Richmond around in the 2017 year. Actually, interestingly, he followed them around in 2016. He was going to write a book about that, but they had a terrible year and they finished like 9th or something again. And they scrapped that, and then they got him to come back in the following year. He followed them around and he wrote a book about their pretty amazing year, that they went from 9th place to winning a flag the next year, nearly sacked the coach, nearly had the board overturned, very similar to what happened in Geelong to Bomber Thompson just before they turned around and started winning a bunch of flags as well. It's quite interesting. Now, what I got from that, from a leadership context, was this. And I thought about this afterwards, after I read the book, because I like footy, I like the Tigers, but I also like this stuff as well. And I thought, if you thought there's 18 teams in the AFL, right? How many of them would have taught kicking, hand pass, all that, rucks, all the specialist position, kicking for goals, etc. Like all of them, right? Like no one wouldn't have been training like that. What was one team doing differently? They were investing in relationships. That's an interesting point. So they built self-confidence in the culture of the Richmond Football Club by not training hard, and putting them in boxing rings and getting to beat up on each other. They changed their attitude, and the leaders became more vulnerable, and they decided to change that hard line and go down a line of being more developing and supportive of each other. And you see that on the field too, because when someone does something wrong, they don't yell at each other, they don't point at each other, they go over and make sure they give each other a pat on the back, pat on the head, all that sort of stuff. It's a really valid point. What would you develop if you had the choice, self-confidence or kicking or hitting skills? I don't think you can go past self-confidence. If you could teach your kids and your players to be more self-confident, the rest will sort itself out. This is a great emotional intelligence competency, and that's optimism. We all like to be led by an optimistic person. It's challenged though. We will our true self emotional intelligence competencies will present. When does that present? When things are good or when things are bad? It's when things are bad, right? That's when we're challenged, and that's when you will find out if you're an optimistic leader or the people around you are optimistic. So it's hard. It's hard. You've just lost the grand final, or you've been bumped out of the qualifying final. How do we be optimistic about that? Well, it's actually really easy. You make a conscious decision to focus on the good parts. So the opposite of optimism is blame. So we blame people. We look for who's to blame. And I've been in plenty of cultures. It's not just workplaces, it's sporting clubs too. I'm sure you've all experienced that. So you've got two choices here. We've had a bad season. Do we be optimistic and forward looking, or do we blame? It's up to you. And that's where leadership skills and this stuff is going to make a big difference. So let's talk about empathy. Empathy is an interesting one. Emotionally intelligent leaders show empathy towards each other. Big difference between sympathy and empathy. I'm sure you're all aware of this. Sympathy is feeling sorry for people, and empathy is understanding things from other people's perspectives, or what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes. I actually asked my 11-year-old this question the other day. I don't know why, but I thought it was interesting. I said, do you know what the difference is, Hamish, between empathy and sympathy? And he said, yeah, everyone knows that. It's got something to do with shoes. I said, yeah, fair point. Okay, empathy is really important, and it makes me so happy to think that our kids are actually having these discussions in school, because certainly I didn't. And you develop empathy over time. You develop empathy when empathy is shown towards you as well. That's the truth. Okay, good stuff. So we're going to talk now. So that's a bit of an overview, a bit of a crash course in emotional intelligence. Just going to pause 1 sec. I'm going to check and see if, is there any questions out there? Before we move on, I'll stop sharing this for a sec so can we all see each other? Is that how this works? Yeah. Cool. I want to see the gallery view. Yeah, here we are. Great. So before I move on to how this particularly impacts on us, did anyone have any questions on any of that so far? Jessica, have you got your hand up? No, that's just my pointer. Sorry. No questions?
Does it resonate
No worries.
with anyone? Does anyone sort of feel like, oh yeah, I can think of a million examples?
I think it makes a big difference in the fact that if you have a negative leadership, it really just takes its toll on everyone else. If everything's all doom and gloom all the time, like what's there to work towards? Like, so that's what I thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, good call, Jess. Negativity is a culture killer. And it's it doesn't matter what you do, and it doesn't matter if you're being paid or if you're not being paid. Negativity permeates through a culture really easily. And there's one thing I've really noticed, another training I do, and I did a really good program with the Leisure Networks crew on this, was about what to watch out for in your workplace culture. And one thing is, like, when negativity starts to creep in, that can really hurt you, because there's nothing truer that, so like, let's say, for example, you're a positive person, and I'm sure most of you are out there. You come into an environment that you would see as really negative. What do you do? Like, do you try to change that culture, or do you think, whoa, no thanks, that's not for me? So it's a little bit like that oil and water, like positive people, negative people, they don't mix very well. And where this can hurt a club or a culture is that when there's too much negative attitude, then it tends to push the positiveness away. So we do have to watch out for that. And you know, it is more and more I notice that I hear about when performance of football teams and cricket teams, actually, there's some very interesting stuff going on. I mean, it is a sign of the times, isn't it, that we start to report on, or you're hearing as part of performance is, the culture of the team's not very good, or the culture of the team is very good. And that's something that's starting to creep into our vocabulary. This is what they're talking about. Do we have a blame culture? Have we got empathetic and supportive leaders? What does the leadership look like, and how do they respond when they're challenged? And their emotional intelligence is going to impact on that culture. Does that make sense? It's pretty common sense stuff, and I think we know it when we see it, but maybe we don't stop and analyze it. But hey, why would you? All right, great. So if there's no questions, I'll go back to sharing the screen, and here we go. Yep. All righty. This is cool, isn't it? All right. So just to move on. So bit of an overview. However, I didn't just want to spend time talking to you about definitions, whatever, boring. I want to talk to you about how this impacts on you. So here's one of the ways that emotional intelligence impacts on us. And I think you might be able to relate to this a little bit. So here's a quote from a Geelong-based sports coach. I just don't understand how that parent could have misunderstood what I was saying in my email. I'm really confused, right? What's that got to do with emotional intelligence? Well, I'll actually show you. So your emotional intelligence will impact on the way you communicate with people. Other people's emotional intelligence will impact on the way that they receive messages. I'll show you what I mean. So here's a very simple message that we need to, as sports people and committee members, we might need to give to our players, parents, etc. Let's say that we want all of the players or parents or whoever's in charge of it to bring back their playing tops on Saturday after the presentation that's coming up. So one way to say that, I hope you can see that okay, and that's not too small. Is that okay, everyone? Can you see that all right? Yeah, mostly nods. Yeah, excellent. One way to say that message might be, hi parents, I need everyone to bring back their tops with them at the presentation day on Saturday. Thanks, Margie. What do we think about that? Got a thumbs up or a thumbs down? All right, not bad. Straight to the point, yeah. Now here's another one. Dear winter season 2019 parents, how good was our season? We can't wait to see you all on Saturday morning at the end of our season celebration. Many parents have asked if they can contribute to the catering. Thanks to everyone who offered, but the club's going to fund this one, so please bring yourselves. Sorry about the late notice, but please don't forget to bring your tops back so we can, et cetera, et cetera. You get the point, right? same message, slightly elongated. And here's another version of that message. All playing tops need to be brought back Saturday, Coach M. Okay. So what's that got to do with this topic? The way our preferences in emotional intelligence will significantly impact on the way we communicate. If you think back on some of the topics, you think of that long list of competencies before that I was showing you. If I'm a person with, let's say, very high empathy, I might relate more to this middle message here. Why do people with high empathy tend to have really long messages to people? There's a real reason for this, and it's true. This is a fact. It's really interesting. It's because they are very conscious of what they've left out of the message. They're worried about the way my message is going to be received, and well, what about that person, and what about the way that's going to, have I explained it enough, and did I give directions, and da 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 da. So someone with low levels of assertiveness and maybe very high levels of empathy and relationship skill tends to communicate in a very long manner. Now, this last message, interesting, sort of the dead opposite of that. So if I was a person with very low levels of empathy, very low levels of self-awareness, very high self-confidence, something along those lines, how do they communicate? Bang, 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 here's the point, moving on. Okay, so our preferences will shape the way we communicate. I want to ask you, and I do hope it's okay to ask you this. When you see those sort of messages, what can you relate to that? Like, have you ever seen a message that's so far the opposite of the way you would have communicated it? You sort of thought, "Whoa, that's really weird."
Yep.
Emily?
Yeah, I have a sister-in-law who is that middle one times 10.
Yep.
It's like, all right, I've tuned out. What are we getting at here? What's the point? Because I've actually
what's the point?
Yeah, like I don't. You get a text message and you need to push the arrow for it to go across to the next screen. I'm like, yeah, I don't even read it.
Yeah,
like,
but mixed somewhere in there, Emily, is the point, isn't there?
Somewhere. I struggle to find it a lot of the time because I like, don't want to read it. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that response and reaction, Emily, is you're of a different emotional intelligence set, right?
And when you said high empathy, low assertiveness, that is her.
Yeah.
Yeah, very little assertiveness, and I'd say my assertiveness is probably very high.
Much higher. Yep.
Much higher. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So that message looks weird to you, and it's actually got more to do with you than with her.
Yeah.
No, and it's true. This is actually true, because if you pointed out to her someone with really, really high relationship skills, that might be really offensive, whereas for you it might be facts. Okay, so no one's right or wrong. There's not a right or wrong. This is what's interesting too. It's about understanding the way that we're shaped, and to be a more self-aware person, the first thing you do is you got to understand it. Yeah, you got to go, why don't I get along with that person? What's going on there? So self-awareness comes from understanding, all right, they're different to me, and that's probably okay.
So Matt, that really hits home with me as well, that sometimes, because I've got high empathy and I take forever to get to the point and put a lot of fluff in my messages. And then sometimes when I'm reading other people's messages that are short and sharp, if I don't have a great relationship with that person, I can often think, oh, it's a bit rude.
What's the matter with them?
Yeah, gee, did I have to say that? So that's about me as well, because I'm wanting it delivered in the way that I would deliver it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really hit home.
Yeah. Look, this is a fact. And the thing is, we know it's happening, but you don't often stop and think about why. So part of being an emotionally intelligent leader, or even just a better leader, to be quite frank, is understand what drives your thoughts, emotions, because there will be a reason, and it's often got something to do with this here. And I'll demonstrate that a little bit more. Thanks for your input, Emily. That's great. Please do feel free if you've got something to say. The best parts of these sort of program comes from you guys. We'll get to that. All right, cool. So let's go back to the next bit because I think you might like this. So, come on. There's our confused person again. What's going on? Why don't they understand me? Okay, EI, emotional intelligence in confrontation. Now, let's talk about assertiveness. I mentioned it before. This is really important. And I know this sounds terribly sexist, and I did say it before. The reality is, quite often, women aren't good at assertiveness. Men are easier, they find it easier, and that is something that can inhibit the way we communicate people and deal with stuff. And I know that this is a fact because I've done lots of leadership programs and I see it. And, you know, there's whole theses written on this stuff, but the reality is you can get better at this. I promise. I'll show you how. So when we say in our brains, I'm too busy to deal with that now, the translation from that, if you're someone who struggles with assertiveness, self-confidence, what you're actually saying is I'm scared of the reaction I get if I address that issue. So it's not about time. And I like in a work capacity, I work in HR and I often get problems brought to me to deal with. And I ask the person, well, how long has this been? Oh, 18 months. Why didn't you haven't had this conversation yet? You want me to have it? Okay, I'll have it. I don't mind. But you're disempowering yourself. You realize that, don't you? Yeah, you're giving away your power to someone else so that they can be the bad guy. Okay, though you won't get to be the bad guy, but you also won't be seen as a good leader either. Just that's the truth. When we say in our minds, I'll get to that issue as soon as I can, sometimes that translates that I really hope this issue goes away. Yeah. So, and this is the thing with confrontation and assertiveness and self-confidence. You need to say this to yourself. Your brain isn't broke. Okay, conflict is fear of conflict or not wanting to deal with conflict is very, very normal. It's one of the most common things in nature. This is what I was talking about before. Here it is, and I've skipped over it, and my bad. Fear. The definition of fear is false emotions appearing real. I am scared of the reaction I'm going to get when I deal with this matter, therefore I'm going to avoid it. I know I should pick up that person's behavior because we've got a code of conduct on the wall in our sports club, but they're going to growl at me, so I'm going to just pretend I didn't see it. Yeah. This is very, very real. And it's actually, and it's becoming more and more real. If you think about it in a much more kind of sinister point of view, the rise of sexual harassment and the Me Too movement and all stuff is a lot of people going, you know what, enough with this avoidance. Yeah. Like it's not fair. People aren't being treated fair. So that's why it's being dealt with, because society has shifted in saying, you know what used to be normal and used to be okay. It's not okay now. You can't treat women differently than men. It's not okay. So think about this, and we'll get to what I'd like you to do with this at the end of the session. If you get nothing else at all out of this emotional intelligence sessions that we're going to do together, when you're heading into a confrontational conflict sort of situation, challenge your natural instinct, because it will be something that's holding you back from doing what you probably should be doing. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Now, I get to do a really fun job in my job, and that's doing what's called an emotional capital reports. Now, I don't know if you can see this properly, so I might have to talk you through it. Can you read these words here? Yeah, they've got most nods. Great. So this is what's called an emotional capital report. So what I do with people in leadership development, so let's say you were all my middle managers in an organization. I would give you a questionnaire, you would fill it out, and it would indicate your tendencies in emotional intelligence, okay? I get this report, and then I get to coach leaders like yourselves on what your responses were in your self-analysis and why that happened. So here's one that is made up, okay? Now, this is a guy who is in your sports club, and his name's Al. And this is his emotional intelligence breakdown. So I'm going to point out a couple of things to you here. Can you see my mouse moving around there? Cool. Oh, this is good. That's worked out well. So let's look at a couple of things of Al. Do me a favor, like, turn your mutes off if you can, and jump in and contribute to this one, because this is really interesting stuff. Now, Al is a guy, and he's a parent of a player of yours. And on his self-assessment that we just happened to come across, it looks something like this. Al's got very high self-reliance, very high assertiveness. But look at these ones over here. Relationship skills, empathy is quite low. So interesting. So if you had to be someone who was to make a guess at what Al's behavior was likely to look like, what do you think that would look like?
He would be a parent that would always speak up, and probably would think that his child is the best one out there, and if his child isn't getting the time on the court or
interesting,
not, he would be the one, saying my child should be doing that. That's
good, Sarah. Yeah, good on you. Kim Fitzpatrick name on there. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking very much the same. He's not a team player, so he's very focused on that. Yeah, very narrow mind focus.
Yeah, narrow-minded. That's interesting. We'll look at that in a sec. What about you, Emily? What did you think about that?
My dog actually just went crazy at a cat out the door, and I wasn't.
No worries. It's all right. It's all good. That's okay.
She went bonkers, and my husband went and sorted her out.
I've usually got my dog kicking around my feet, but she's gone off now.
Oh, yeah, she's at my feet. And then the next door neighbour has a white fluffy cat, which came into our front yard, and she was psycho. So
hilarious. Like, isn't the world changed? Yes. Look, I've got to disclose something. I've got my presenter shoes on under the desk here. It's so cold, my God. All right, so
Fee as well.
Yeah, that's great, Fee. So excellent. Well done to you all. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd get out of that. And this is exactly right. So this is an emotional intelligence competency set that is someone who's very, very assertive. What does that mean? That they are very conscious of themselves. They are not shy. They're quite often very extroverted. Self-reliance is a great competency to have in a leader. However, if you've got very little empathy and relationship skills, they're gonna clash with each other, because what it means is it will all be about me and not about anyone else. So that's the opposite of self-awareness.
Sorry, Matt, just a quick one. It's an interesting on that flexibility. That's a high score. Is that something you'd see often, that someone that is still quite assertive and but doesn't have those relationship skills, that is also quite flexible?
Yeah, look, could be. So one thing about this which is really interesting is you don't see the same thing twice, which is always fascinating to me. The last one's also of interest as well. It's when you see these first things and the things we tend to focus on, like low empathy, relationship skills, I think they'd be a nightmare. Not necessarily, because their last emotional intelligence, they got quite high optimism as well. So an optimism and flexible. So this could be a real doer. Like, this is someone who can just get the job done, like point them in the right direction and let them go. They might trample people left, right, and center, but they're going to get the job done. So yeah, it's not common, but it doesn't necessarily reflect a negative person, just a certain tendency to be maybe a bit overbearing. Does that make sense?
I was just going to say, in a work environment, it comes across as someone that you would go see because they're the best at their job, not necessarily because you've built a relationship with them. Like we have a few solicitors like that here. So.
Yeah. Look, great skill set. Absolutely. I mean, can you be a highly empathetic, prosecution lawyer? You probably got to park that in a lot of your job, really, to be honest. However, you've got to be very resilient, don't you? And that's going to come from optimism. So, so there's not good or bad in these things, but there will be tendencies. So what I'm going to do with this, that's really great input. You're all over it. You guys are going to be like experts on this by the end of this session. So let's do a little case study, and I want you to help me on this too. So I made this up the other day, and I'm going to ask you a few questions. So this is a profile of Assertive, or Al. Okay, so Al is a parent of one of your junior players, and I think someone's already started picking out this. He's a very vocal parent and very conscious of how his daughter is treated on your team. She's a very good player, and he knows it. Just before the season started, you had a lot of players, new players, sign up. And you can't knock them back. You're working hard to make sure that no one kid is spending too much time on the bench. So you've developed a rotation policy. Now, you've just received a text from Al, and he's asking to catch up with you later tonight and to discuss the issue of Missy's playing time. Okay? So that's what you've got. So based on what our conversation has been so far, what sort of conversation is this likely to be? I'm going to stop sharing for a sec so we can see each other. So, take it off mute if you can. Just go for it. What do you think's going to happen?
I think he's going to come in hot and heavy.
Could be.
He's going to open up the conversation with his opinions without asking. Sort of just why Missy had 6 minutes, like just barrage of what he needs to cross without asking if there was. It'd be a one-way conversation, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
If there's any actual reasoning, is what I would think.
Good, Emily. Yep. What else? Anyone else?
I was going to say, similar to Emily, that he'd have a lot of trouble understanding your point of view. And just
I don't think he'd be a very good listener either.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right about that. One thing about empathy, and I probably didn't mention this before because I was following a different track, empathy is demonstrated in active listening. Because I ask you a question. So, you meet someone at a party and they ask you a question, but there's only reason they ask you that question is so they can tell you what their opinion is about that topic. It's like, oh, you went to Fiji. Oh, I went there once, and you just sort of get caught back in a barrage. That's very low empathy because that's someone isn't actually interested in the external because they're more focused on themselves. So yeah, what would you expect in that phone call? What's going to be the focus of that phone call, do you think?
His daughter's playing time.
Yeah, exactly. And if you did happen to, it would be nice, parents should come with ECR scores, yeah? So you'd know, yeah, you're all right. Come on in. I'm sure that's not right. So, yeah, the focus is going to be specifically about his daughter. So it's not, so if it was his son or his twins or whatever, that would be the focus there. So that's going to challenge us, isn't it? Because if you're a person who's the dead opposite, and this is the point I'm trying to get to, what are you going to do? Is that something you're going to, so what would you shoot back a text? I'm busy, or what be your approach in this situation is what I'm asking.
I'd be all up for the conversation. I'd probably let him have his 2 minutes.
Yep.
But then I'd ask him a question.
Yeah.
So, yeah, find a way to ask him something, so to make him think through what he's doing a bit.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I agree with Emily, sort of that, let them have their rant or whatever, and then, you know, sort of question them to put them in your shoes. Well, if you were in my situation with all these kids signed up, how would you sort of combat that and try and then, I guess, compromise, but get both sides of the understanding? Attempt to, anyway.
Yeah. Good, Grace. Yeah, that's
great. Make him feel a bit important by being part of the decision-making process.
Yeah.
That sounded very patronising. Sorry.
Yeah, you're right in what you're saying. I mean, you know, you want to treat your stakeholders as important. I mean, you don't have to agree with them to be effective. Yeah, as a leader of them.
Yep.
What did you think there, Jesse?
It's an interesting one. It's even, I guess, beyond the emotional response, and it's I see it, I've seen it a fair bit in actual that whole discussion of development across a group versus development of an individual, and it's a fair battle that goes on in sport, especially in junior pathways. I think having that, approaching it with that assertiveness from an individual perspective, that you're approaching it from the perspective of, we're doing it as a club-wide approach, or we're doing it as a collective unit to have, this is our vision, this is what we are trying to achieve. At least you fall back on, at the end of the day, these are the values that we're trying to stand by. And I think that helps your position to know, well, this is not just me approaching it this way, this is a club approaching it this way. But I think in terms of that individual discussion, if you approach it kind of headstrong, going against a headstrong, sometimes you can butt heads and not get. So at least trying to approach it with, okay, well, what's the end goal we're trying to get out of this discussion? What's something that we're going to be able to actually at least have a work around with this individual circumstance is probably a good way to approach it, I think.
Yeah, good. Yeah, look, you're right. I mean, that's all really rational explanations, and it's a great path to go down. Where you might come up against it against certain people is sometimes if you feel like you're not hitting the mark there with those sort of explanations, do think back on that made up profile that I showed you, because when people do have a lack of empathy or self-awareness, they won't necessarily care, because they're just very, very self-focused. Does that make them a bad person? No, maybe that's just the way they were brought up, just the way that they were, you know, they were probably a good athlete when they were a kid and they were given everything. Who knows? You know what I mean? There's a raft of
I was about to say that profile fits probably a very good individual sport athlete. To be
honest. It does. You have to be absolutely self-actualized, but also focused on yourself, don't you? I mean, you haven't got time for other people to become the top 1% of achieving anything.
Yeah.
Very good. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask you a couple of things on this, and because I figured, well, as part of a leadership development program, you know, it would be good to give you some tips on this sort of stuff. And if you're very, very good at this, great, good for you. But if you're not, then, you know, this might help a little bit. So I just want to go back to this for a second. And so you're all absolutely right what you're saying there. So his approach is likely to be me, yeah? And you see that because you have the advantage in this situation of preempting what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. His priority is going to be himself and his needs, okay? So doesn't necessarily care about the rest of the players or the team or your values or whatever. I mean, you try to make sense. I mean, Jesse, spot on. Just don't be too sad if it doesn't work. That's all. But what I wanted to talk about is what are some good approaches with dealing with people like this? Because I, as a mediator, I have to meet a lot of Als in my life. You can imagine. I walk into places I used to, don't now, of course, get on a plane and fly to Sydney and meet two people for the first time who are clashing with each other over, you know, a office space or something like that. I could tell you some stories, believe me. But anyway, my job there is to listen to them and not make them feel silly and not prove them wrong, but make sure that they change their perspective a little bit. And there is some good ways you can do that. So I wanted to bring that into the conversation. So here's a really good tip that I think a lot of people, if you're a person with not great self-confidence, not great assertiveness, and you're coming up against someone like Al, remember that communication, that phone call, and there was a really good example out there before. The worst thing you can do is the long, floral, beating around the bush kind of explanation. So what you must do with someone like Al is get to the point. Does that make sense? Because that's the sort of communication that they want. Anything else will be seen as wrong, yeah, or incorrect. So I'll give you a really good example of this. I was doing some leadership development work with when I was in local government once, and I met this young lady, and she was a real good engineer. She was a, millennial, very head down, do the job, not very good with people, but in that job, she's very good at what she did. She's design, specifics, accuracy, attention to detail, you name it. Now, she was managed by someone who was the dead opposite of her, by someone who was very relational, really high empathy, not details driven, not very self-confident. And when I was talking to her one day about, her experiences at work, she's like, my biggest thing is I'm happy to do what my manager wants me to do, but he just won't get to the point. Just tell me what to do and move on. So she had a skill set like Al, really good person, by the way, and very good at her job, but she was managed by someone the dead opposite. What was her frustration? What are you telling me here? Does that make sense? Okay, so get to the point. Now, this is important. If you're someone the enemy of low levels of assertiveness or self-confidence is organization. Be prepared. One really good tip about assertiveness, be organized, know what you want to say and how you're going to say it before you get there. That will actually really help. Expect resistance. So when I used to go into performance management sessions, I used to have to sack people and horrible stuff like that. And guess what? They're not going to be happy about it, right? So what do I got to do? This is the situation. This is why we're here. Unfortunately, there was an investigation. This is what was found. This is the outcome. Emotion. Yep, I really appreciate that. And this is the outcome. So after you've heard that a few times, it's called the broken record approach. Even a really angry, emotional person is kind of go, yeah, I don't want to keep hearing that. I'm going to move on now. So that's the broken record approach. Get to the point, prepare for what you want to say and say it. Make sure you're clear about what you're saying. And just one tip on that, and take it or leave it. The explanation that we would tend to go to, we want to be fair, we want to be da-da-da-da-da. I think, Jesse, you were right when you're saying our club values dictate that we have X amount of people, we have X amount of playing time. And I actually liked someone's suggestions because I don't think when you can hold up a mirror to someone's behavior, they don't like it. And this is a trick that you do as a mediator. If I was mediating against this situation between Al and his coach, I would say, so Al, if it was up to you, would you make sure that your daughter always gets the most playing time out of all the players? And then don't say anything. What sort of response do you think you're going to get to that? Oh, no, that's not fair. Exactly. Good point, Al, that you just came up with by yourself. Yeah. And move on from there. Okay. Any more tips that anyone can think of? It's a good list. Great.
I think, just as frustrating as it would be to be on the receiving end of that phone call, because you probably do expect a particular tone, it's really important, I think, in those conversations, and I've had them with parents, they just want to feel heard. So if you let them have their 3 minutes of just talking at you, pick out some key points to say, yes, I agree, or yes, I understand X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we do it this way. Yeah, I just think it's what my boss actually calls the shit sandwich, excuse me. But, you know, you got to pick out the couple positives in what they're saying, feed that back, and then stick to your guns. So, yeah,
Good.
I have found useful what I do. So,
Yeah,
but,
it's very disarming when if someone comes into a conversation, they're expecting to get objection, and you kind of go, yeah, you're right. They're all of a sudden you're going to get a reaction that goes, oh, okay, well, that's all I've got to say about that. You know, so there's nothing else to say. Then you move on.
Matt, what would your suggestion be about that if, and I'm going to use myself as an example here so I don't offend anyone, that if you know that you struggle and you try to be prepared and you know what you want out of it, but you know also that there's a chance that things might get twisted and you sort of go off course.
Yeah.
Would your suggestion be to bring another person into that meeting with you who you maybe could word up beforehand and say, these are our expected outcomes of this conversation. This guy's going to resist it. So help me stay on track. Or would you think that you just have to do it yourself?
Look, it's depending on the seriousness of the situation. I mean, you know, if I think to workplace scenarios that might be, you know, if you don't want to end the result being an unfair dismissal or a discrimination claim or something, then I would definitely, you know, look to have some support because things do get twisted. In a scenario like we're talking about today, I would be careful not to disempower yourself. Because if you're in a leadership position and you want to be seen as a leader, this is just real. This is life. You know, you have to deal with it. And the thing about confrontation and assertiveness is it gets easier. It's a muscle. You have to practice, and when you do, you'll get much better at it.
Cool.
Yeah. Good stuff. I see we're nearly out of time, so I just wanted to finish on the very last bit, and then I'll throw it back over to Fiona. So just wanted to get out of that. Here we are. So yeah, there we go. So all I wanted to say in conclusion, and this is kind of important, is what about next time? So what I'd love you to do is think about this sort of stuff and make a conscious decision to practice sometime between now and next month. In fact, what I'd love for you to do, if you can, is to send Fiona a scenario or a situation that you might be struggling with. As part of leadership development, a really, really good, it's called experiential learning, is coaching. So what I'd really like to do is for you all to send Fiona something via an email that she can forward on to me, and we can work through some issues. And when we were talking about it, yesterday, I was thinking, it doesn't just have to be in your sports clubs and things. If there's something in regards to your personal development in workplaces and stuff like that, more than happy to talk about that as well. So I'll talk a little bit more about what happens with our emotions next month. But what I'd really like to do is make it a good session for you about you. So please send something think about this between now and next month, and send Fiona some thoughts on this, emotional intelligence. And if something that you need some help with, then just put that in an email and we will work our way through that. Here's some contacts for me. You're very, very welcome to keep in touch via LinkedIn or any of these contact points here. And that's all. I'm going to leave you alone and let you get back to your program now. So I'll stop sharing there. And I wanted to say thank you very, very much for your input. It's not always easy in this format, trying to, get input, but your input's really, really good and it makes it a good session. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was really valuable. And every
That was-
time I've spoken to you, I take so much away for, as you said, sporting context, work context, and also just personal. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing you next time. I know that you've got to rush off, so we'll let you go.
I do. I'd love to hang out and we'll hit the bar, but we won't. So anyway, I've got to get back to work. Good luck with the rest of your program, and we'll do some more fun stuff next month.
See you next time.
Thanks,
All
Matt.
right.
See you
Thanks a
later,
lot,
guys.
Matt.
Have a
Terrific.
good night. Bye.
Thank you.
See ya.
All right, so everyone, I thought maybe just to get back into our breakout rooms, and this time I'll take a little bit more time, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll do 2 breakout rooms, one of 3, and well, actually one of 4, including Kim and Maddie, and then another of 4. And maybe if you just want to bounce off each other, what you're thinking, I know it's very sort of new and you've just thought about it, but I reckon you'll be able to think about 3 or 4 different things that you might come back to Matt with. But if you want to just talk to each other about that, so that you can get ideas from each other as well about what you might come back with. So bear with me and I'll have a better go at this time. I promise, Jess and Emily. All right, I need to recreate. I need 2 rooms. Oh, I think it's just going to do it automatically. Let's see how that goes.
Hello. Oh,
You're still muted, Fiona.
Fiona, you're on mute.
I'm just saying it's sort of like bringing all of the children back to the fold or something.
I love the dramatic of that though, just watching, you know.
Yeah, I do talk with my hands very, very much. I get told that all of the time. Yeah. What did you think of Matt's session so far?
Really good, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's going to help us be empowered. Certainly for me, it hit home heaps.
Fiona, did he used to be at GMHBA?
BCYF. He was. Look, he might have. It's not on his LinkedIn that he was GMHBA, but he wasn't.
He's really familiar, and don't know why.
He's Ocean
Don't know
Grove,
why.
and he was a consultant, so maybe he consulted to GMHBA.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm hoping that hit home. And oh, sorry, Shanae's been kicked out. Did I kick her out?
No.
It was
She,
frozen.
I think
Yeah.
she might have had
I
some
didn't
tech
kick you out,
issues.
did I, Shanae?
No, my internet just dropped out.
Oh, that's okay. All right, that's all right. I suddenly thought I'd done something wrong. Yeah, I think that it's really useful information for us to understand a bit of the psychology around dealing with people who aren't, you know, and our natural instinct, as you would all have done, I'm sure, is surround yourself with people who are like-minded. And especially for those who are in bigger clubs where there is that bit more diversity, it's really hard. And you know, I've got a classic example of an owl that I had him for 3 years, and he was a father of 2 daughters. You'd only think that one of them breathed air. And you know, he was hard work. And by the end of last year, we ended up having, I lost all my diplomacy, and we ended up butting heads big time. And yeah, and in the end, he actually said something really, really nasty to me about my own daughter, who didn't even play last year because she'd fractured her back falling off a horse. And I just thought, you know what, that's it, done, you're gone. I've tried to do this for 3 years and nothing seemed to work. So I'm really interested in what Matt's got to say to be able to practice some of those strategies. Yeah, so I'm hoping that will be useful to you as well. So if you can get something through to me that, so what he wants is a scenario, and it can be with you, you know, I'm thinking of you, Maddie, young Maddie, sharing Maddie, could be with a sibling, or it could be with, you know, a cousin that you can't stand when you get together, or anything at all, that there's some sort of friction. Then yeah, just jot it down, send it through. And if you can do that within the next week, because then it'll give Matt a few weeks, or a couple of weeks at least, to be able to reply. And I'm not opposed either to, if you want to do it by video, so you don't have to write it if you don't want to. I'm happy for you to record it on your phone and send it through, you know, just as a video, you know, this is my scenario. Then that might be good. Just to change up the way that we get to see it and discuss it at the next session. The other things I just wanted, before we go, I've got 10 minutes left, is just for those of you who are using the Miro boards, if you can just write some personal reflections on those. So each session, if you can just sort of put up what you might have got out of it. It could be 3 words, could be a paragraph, could be an essay. But if you can just remember to go back to that, or back to your pen and paper, that would be fantastic. Because at the end, we might have a bit of a sharing of that at our last session. What else did I want to mention to you? Zoom's working, so I'm going to stick to Zoom for next time, if that works for everyone else. That seemed less clunky than MS Teams. Yeah, I think that was all. Oh, and I've got an email set to go with a few resources of videos and books and stuff. And the emotional intelligence stuff, it's really interesting if you've got time to read about it. There's been a lot of research done in the last 20 years, and I know that it's 20 years ago, so Maddie will be thinking, oh God, that's a lifetime, but for me it's less than half a lifetime. So you know, the fact that there's only 20 years of research sort of says that it's still emerging, and there's still a lot to be said about it. So there's a guy, Dan Goleman, I think his name is, and he's the guy to start reading about it all anyway. All right, so does anyone, and most of you are on holidays, I'm thinking. No, you're not, Sarah. No, you're not, Shanae. Oh no, so only Grace. The people who are smiling are on holidays. Grace is smiling. Well, you're sort of on holidays, Kim, except that shearing is it's a change of scenery, at least, from teaching. But yeah, so thank you very much for coming along. If there's anything I've forgotten, I'll pop it in the email. If you can try and get on to, if you can try and beat Maddie into filling out your reflection after each week. You'll have to be fast because I reckon it's probably already done before 5 o'clock. But if you can send that through, that'd be terrific. It just guides me. And the more, as Matt said during it, the more input that you can give, the better the sessions are going to be, because then we know exactly what you want out of it. So, yeah. And for those of you who are on Facebook, lucky you, Maddie, Tobias.
Delivery.
Right with one, thank you. I've forgotten my train of thought then. Facebook, get on it. Yeah, like if you're a Facebook user, I'm not saying otherwise. And also your LinkedIn profile. So I know Lee Doherty has done hers, but if you can just all connect on LinkedIn, if you are already on LinkedIn, that'd be a bit of fun as well. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go and stay warm, and we'll see you in a month.
Cool.
Okay.
Fee,
See you, everyone.
Fee, can I stay on and ask you something?